I think it's safe to say that, to many, Darius was the most fascinating character in Atlanta. The character who started off as the oddball comic relief grew to be much more, with many viewing the episodes that center around him as the best in the series. It never felt as though they pivoted with the character either. The audience came to know him more and better as the series went on. What originally may have seemed like random comments he made, adding humor to scenes due to how out of place they were, became clear early framework for his personality as it would be established. Despite this, even as we got to better understanding the character, there was always a sense that we didn't know him quite as well as the rest of the cast. I think that was a big part of his appeal, because there remained an aura of mystery, leaving you wanting more. Much like how I'm always left wanting more subscribers. Please, consider subscribing. And then, the series final happened. The Atlanta final, It Was All a Dream, will likely go down as one of the best finals as it really opens the series to a multitude of new questions. Most notably, she thick though? I'll be going into spoilers from here, so if you haven't, finish Atlanta. I guess this could count as an ending explained video, or at least my perspective on the ending. Atlanta's closing episode has a plot following Ern, Al, and Van at a Black Fusion sushi joint, and a separate plot following Darius as he heads to his sensory deprivation tank session. The audience understand that he's actually quite familiar with the experience, as he discusses it with a woman he meets early into the episode. She mentions she had to stop going, as she had a hard time distinguishing what was real from what wasn't. Darius explains that he has a trick to verify that. Search for Judge Judy. As her show is always playing on television, he's trained his brain to view her with a fat ass whenever he sees her during a tank session. If he sees her and she isn't thick, that's real life. This mostly serves as a means to communicate with the audience that we should be on the lookout for this detail. Especially as he was watching Judge Judy at the start of the episode, though we didn't get to see if she was thick or not, as Darius looked away before she got up. Already, we're left wondering, is this real or not? He meets another woman on his way to the tank. London. This one's a friend from his past. They used to party together, and similar to him, she changes phone numbers very frequently. Although he's left the party days behind him, she hasn't. She has a water bottle full of vodka in her car and has been macrodosing all day. She's also hitting a blunt while driving and has an empty beer bottle next to her in the passenger seat. The pair is pulled over by an officer who accuses her of having vodka next to her. To prove that this is water, she steals my party trick and chugs the vodka in front of the officer, saying that if it were vodka, she wouldn't be able to do that. I beg to differ. Then, she somehow passes the sobriety test the officer makes her take. All seems fine until she takes the officer's firearm and tries to drive off, causing her to crash into a cyclist and...
Wait!
I'm sorry!
Wait, where are you going?
I'm sorry! This is all your fault!
What do you mean? Oh!
As the title of the episode tells us, it was all a dream. He was in a hallucinated reality created by his time in the tank. This does explain why he was watching Judge Judy at the start of the episode, and it indicates to Darius and the viewer that there may be a larger problem at hand. His grip on reality may not be as good as he thought it was. Seemingly, he doesn't remember getting into the tank. This notion distorts his sense of reality even more, which we, the audience, see to be true as he grabs one of the women in the tea room and yells,
Wake up!
I don't understand.
Hey, don't come back.
Hey man, I thought it was a dream.
Admittedly, something seemed off in that room. At this point, we, as audience members, are also questioning Darius's perspective. You may even question his perspective of past episodes, as you wonder how long he's been in the tank. I mean, he says he goes weekly, right? Sure, he might be out of it now, as indicated by the shouting not working and him getting kicked out. But what if there have been times when he wasn't out of it? What if he was in it during the Teddy Perkins episode? After getting kicked out, Darius goes to bring his brother, Eze, his prescription, which he picked up earlier in the episode. His brother is rather sick, but greets him and offers to give him a bowl of jollof. We see the brothers are close, but don't necessarily spend too much time together. Darius tells his brother that he can't stay long, to which his brother tells him not to worry. He would rather Darius be out than inside with him. As his brother goes to prepare the bowl, Darius looks at a picture of the two of them and tells his brother he misses him. We see his brother in the background of the frame, but after Darius says this, Eze steps out and we no longer see him. A detail I enjoyed. We no longer hear him either. Darius asks him how their parents are doing and laughs at the answer that we cannot hear. He then turns around and
Oh. Damn. Damn.
Are you okay?
he was in the tank again. Based on the employee's reaction, last time he woke up probably wasn't real. He then immediately wakes up. Again. We are starting to truly understand the severity of his reality distortion. Darius cannot tell what is real and what is fake, because even though he can find triggers that prove he is in a hallucination, he doesn't know how to prevent the next one from starting before he returns to reality. Moreover, we also learned something we had not known about Darius until this point. He lost his brother, someone he was clearly very close to. It was only when saying, "I miss you," to his brother, that he acknowledged it for himself. This is why we couldn't hear Eze's answer, why he left the frame. Hell, when speaking to the pharmacist, Darius even spelled his brother's name, E-Z-E, which may have been our first hint, as this could be taken as a reference to the deceased rapper, Eazy-E. Based on how young he looked in the picture he had with his brother, I would assume Darius lost him some time ago. I would also assume that he lost his parents, as the question he asked his brother seemed to indicate Eze could communicate with them, but he couldn't. This gives us a better understanding of why Darius seems to need to disconnect from reality so much. Either through sensory deprivation tanks or drugs, we often see Darius altering his reality. He's trying to cope with the reality he lives in, to numb his pain. He may have been trying to do this since before the series started. This is the most we learn about Darius, and still leaves a lot to be answered. The next time we see Darius, he's helping the rest of the main cast escape the previously mentioned sushi restaurant before telling them to hop into his pink Maserati. Marvin Gaye's Dream of a Lifetime is playing. Later, when they ask him how he got the car, he tells them he stole it, but it doesn't matter because he's in the tank. Ern tries telling him that he isn't and that they're his friends, but Darius responds that maybe they were always part of the dream. Maybe everything that's happened between him and them happened in the tank. The rest of them go outside to go smoke some weed, but Darius stays behind, telling them he'll join in a minute. He takes a long look at his friends before turning back to watch Judge Judy. We hear sirens in the distance. As Judy gets up, the camera cuts back to him. He smiles. It almost feels like a smile of relief. As I mentioned, the audience is left wondering, is she thick?
Oh. Damn. Damn.
Obviously, there are two possible answers. Let's suppose she isn't, which would mostly confirm this to be reality. I say mostly because As we've seen through the episode, indicators that the session has ended are no longer reliable. That said, running with the idea that this is reality, we are to understand that Darius's relieved smile is to indicate his joy in knowing that he found his way back. The events of the series did happen. He actually is with his loved ones, his friends. But there is a sad reality that comes with that. Alfred mostly lives on a remote farm now. Van and Ern are leaving. He will soon find himself mostly separated from his found family. That grief may not be the same grief he feels for the family members he lost, but for someone who's clearly hurting to then see all the people they care for leave, that's bound to add to his pain. Though, this is without taking into consideration the implication made by the sirens in the distance. The sound of the sirens should indicate to the viewer that law enforcement is on their way, likely in response to Darius stealing the Maserati. He may end up in prison, isolating him even further. He can serve up to 20 years in response for this crime. The one plus that may come from this would be separating Darius from drugs and the sensory deprivation tank, hopefully allowing him to properly grieve and process his emotions. The reality Darius is returning to is a grim one, and though there may be relief in knowing it's real, more struggles are to come. But what if she's thick though? Then this too is false. Another reality created in the tank. Though this one's a bit different than those that came before. In this one, we, the audience, followed the other characters, not just Darius. So if this is fake, it might all be. Alfred never became Paperboy. He's still living with Darius and pushing for cash. Ern's relationship with Val is still falling apart, and so is every other part of the Stanford dropout's life. The European tour never happened. Teddy Perkins never happened. Or maybe it started later into the series. Maybe it only started with season 4. Maybe Alfred and Ernest don't even exist. There's just Darius. After losing his family, Darius started doing sensory deprivation sessions to numb his pain, and in those sessions, he created a found family for himself. It was a way of coping with the pain and loneliness. It would make sense. The entire series set in Darius' mind would explain the more surreal happenings that contrast so sharply with the otherwise grounded world. The invisible cars, the sandwich man, all that. In episode 1, Darius even tells us he's getting mad deja vu before describing exactly what was around him from the previous time he'd seen it. From the start, there were hints that there was something off and that Darius was somehow connected to it. We should also recognize that Alfred's successful career is something of a miracle. No matter how talented we are, nor how hard we work, it takes an immense stroke of luck to achieve the level of success he did in the music industry. It wouldn't be far-fetched to believe this is something Darius imagined. Furthermore, it makes sense that this world, one in which the main cast is frequently surrounded by death, was born out of grief. Yodel Kid, Tupac, Teddy, Benny, and even the shooting in episode 1, the series isn't lacking dead people. This could reflect the state of mind that led Darius to escapism in the first place, one which had him frequently thinking about loss. Interestingly, if this is the case, we may view his friend's impending departure as a good thing instead of a bad thing. Whereas, if this were real, Darius would be even more isolated than he had been before. If this is indeed a world created by his subconscious, it can represent a sign of growth. His mind is slowly abandoning the coping mechanisms he needed all this time. He may finally be ready to face reality, along with what he's lost. It's very bittersweet in the sense that he will once again be losing loved ones, but this time it will push him further into his growth instead of causing him to regress. Another alternative would be to understand these departures as a manifestation of his sorrow, his feelings that everyone leaves and he's the only one being left behind. Although these hypotheticals are interesting, I do not think they're the most interesting implication available. Instead, I'd like to ask the following. Is Darius alive?
As humans, we're always close to destruction. Life itself is but a series of close calls. I mean, how would you know you were alive unless you knew you could die? I really should be, huh?
To have Darius say this in the second episode is so interesting considering the way it ended. The line feels as though it exists in direct response to the final episode, but this was years before they would write that final season. The series would even go on a multi-year hiatus between the second and third, resulting in a gap of over 6 years between the two episodes being discussed. So, although it is possible they started thinking about it was all a dream when they started the series, I don't think this was necessarily the case. In fact, according to Hiro Murai, the director for both these episodes, as well as 24 other episodes in the series, this was not originally meant to be the series' final. He told Vanity Fair that they had never planned a final episode, saying they kinda just stumbled on it and realized we already had one. And this makes so much sense. The themes explored in the final are not new to the show by any means, and these two episodes aren't the only times it was explored. We look back at episodes such as New Jazz or Three Slaps, amongst others, and understand that the series is always asking us what is and isn't real. In fact, the series opens with Earn describing a dream. To fans of Glover's, this shouldn't be too surprising, as dreams, false realities, and simulations are repeated themes throughout many of his projects. For instance, his STN-MTN mixtape opens with the words, "I had a dream I ran Atlanta," and closes with the words, "and then I woke up." Glover also spoke on this a bit before the final season started airing. During a panel held by the cast and crew of the series in June of 2022 at the Museum of Modern Arts, the series creator stated that he doesn't understand why people are so worried about living in a simulation. So long as it's real to them, who cares if it isn't actually real? He says it can all be fake, and that's okay. To those of you who are familiar with Albert Camus, or who may have watched my Everything Everywhere All at Once video, this may remind you of absurdism. Lack of greater meaning allows us to give our own meaning to everything, and there's nothing to contradict us. However, I do think this statement no longer applies to Darius. Glover proposes that if we experience the world as real, it doesn't matter whether it's real or not. We're experiencing it as real, therefore it's real to us. The actions are real, but more importantly, so are the consequences. Darius has inceptioned himself, and therefore he doesn't experience it as real. He experiences it as fake. He is constantly in close calls with death, but cannot recognize them as anything more than the next thing to make him wake up, even if it might just be real. The Atlanta crew flipped the concept and fear that many have and created a situation of their own with it. When returning to the statement made in episode 2, what does this tell us about Darius? If we do not know we are alive unless we know we could die at any moment, and Darius has lost touch with reality to the extent that he does not believe there are consequences to his action, does he know he's alive? To take it even further, is he alive? Not in a biological sense, but as a person, is he experiencing life? By his own definition, I don't think he is. Not anymore. I think Darius recognizes that for us to progress, for us to live as people, we need to experience the outcome of our actions. We need to face the harder realities we hope not to. We need to know that at any moment things can go wrong. We can die. More than just that, our loved ones could die. And there's nothing we can do about it. By entering the tanks, Darius is creating a world without consequences. He can experience everything, but never in full, never enough for it to shape him further. Instead, it shapes him to feel the impact of experiences less and less. As a result, he will continue to physically experience these events in a simulated world, but he'll never emotionally experience them, thus removing his own opportunity for growth. The reason death is so important to our knowledge of our own existence is its permanence. It is, in a sense, the most permanent consequence. By trying to remove the death of his family, along with the possibility of his own death, Darius has removed permanence from his life, creating an endless cycle where he never needs to deal with the outcome of events around him, the parts of these events that shape us. So, if I may answer my own question, he is alive, but only in the physical sense of the word. Through the tanks, Darius has stopped experiencing life. After all, what does it mean to be alive when nothing you experience could ever last?